Yeah, so the Kraken might just be bad. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken get blown out at home again, this time 5-1 against the Colorado Avalanche. So by giving up one extra goal, they narrowly avoid this already being the fourth of the 7 home games they've played that they've lost 4-1. Now, I suppose to be fair, they have still been at least a decent team on the road. They're NHL 500 with a 3-3-3 record. And yeah, that would be 3-6 in any other sport, and we'd be talking about how bad they are anyway. But the rules are the rules in the NHL, so they've come away with as many points as they've played games on the road. At home, though, they are straight up terrible. In the 7 games they've played so far at home, they're just 2-5, and honestly, that makes them sound more competitive than they've been, as they've been outscored 18-29 in those 7 games. And that's including that game against Carolina, where they beat them 7-4. So if you take that out, it's 11 then to 25 so far to this point. So they're not just losing games by a goal or two, they're getting absolutely blown out in every game. And yes, some of those goals early on in the season were empty netters towards the end of games, a couple of them in Calgary, and I think 1 or 2 in some other games. But they've lost these last 2 at home to Edmonton, the second worst team in the NHL, and now Colorado, by a combined score of 9-2. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think there's too much to read into as far as the difference of playing at home and on the road with this team, even though we saw a similar trend last season where they were around an average to slightly above average team at home, and then were very good on the road to get them to that 100 points on the season. And now this year, they've been about average on the road and horrible at home. Either way, even if there isn't much of a difference and that's all coincidental, the truth of the matter is, from a fan perspective, people are paying to go watch them play at home and hopefully play well, and so far they've only done that in 1, I guess maybe 2 games. And you know what, while we're on the subject, to build on that a little bit more, it would be one thing if they had this 2-5 home record, but we're at least losing competitive, close 1-2 goal games that are at least interesting towards the last few minutes. But instead, they're getting completely blown out to the point where the stands are mostly empty, and a lot of the people that are still there by the end of the games are the few away fans scattered around the arena. With just one of those 5 losses being even somewhat interesting towards the end of the game, that being the one against Calgary, where with an empty net, they did get 1 extra goal to bring it to within 1 late in the game, but then gave up the 2 empty netters quickly after to make that the 6-3 score against a terrible Calgary team that has half of their players basically demanding to leave. So again, even in that circumstance, it was bad enough that they were even in that spot in the first place to begin with. Of course, yes, with that all having been said, it's still not all doom and gloom for the Kraken. They're still less than a quarter of the way through the season, so there's plenty of time to turn things around, but honestly, the way they've been playing lately, at least the consistency certainly isn't there to give me the confidence that they're going to be able to do that. Because they're at the point right now where they're going to have to go through a winning streak to get back to within a shouting distance of a playoff spot. Now to focus in on this game, at least for a little bit anyway, we really don't have to spend too much time on it. After all, from a Kraken perspective, it's not one that we really want to be thinking about for all that much longer. But to start the game, it is Decord that ends up getting the start for the Kraken and playing the entire way, which I thought was a little bit interesting at first, considering Grubauer tends to be the guy they go to against the Avalanche, with that being the team that he seems to play the best against. But at the same time, they did just play the same team a few days ago, so at least mixes things up with familiarity with goaltender, plus the Avalanche also were going with, well, in that case, their starter, where the Kraken just faced their backup in Colorado. But even outside of Decord starting, there was also a bit of a shakeup with the lines for the Kraken coming into this game, and they got shook up even more as the game went along. Hackstall, especially in the third period, just throwing out all sorts of different combinations of players to try to get something to start working for this team. Nothing seemed to click, but coming into the game, there were some differences, largely because of the return of Brandon Tanev, who ended up filling a spot on the second line. And then the third line was the same. The fourth line is the one that ended up being all guys that played in the playoffs for the Firebirds last year, with it being Winterton and Cartier centered by right. And you know what? Early on, it seemed like things were going to work out for the Kraken with these new lines, and especially the return of Tanev, as they really dominated this first period from start to finish, as we've kind of seen them do quite a bit this season. And that Tanev line in particular, I think it was their first shift out on the ice. They end up getting an odd man chance the other way. Tanev with the puck, and I think it was McCann on the other side, but Tanev ends up taking the shot with the pass pretty well blocked off. The shot goes off of the post though and stays out. He ends up getting a rebound chance, but that is swallowed up by Georgiev. So the Avalanche managed to survive that little rush there by the second line. But they wouldn't be able to survive that second line for that much longer, as a couple shifts later, that second line is right back in the offensive end. It's Vince Dunn who fires off a shot from the blue line. It's saved by Georgiev, but the rebound comes out to Tanev out net front, and he's got a half-open cage to shoot at. He makes no mistake, puts it right into the netting, and gives the Kraken that 1-0 lead for Tanev right onto the score sheet, and getting his first goal of the season in just his second game so far, and his first full one after exiting the first game of the season against Vegas early on. And from there, the Kraken continued to play this first period pretty well, really right up until the end of it, like I guess I already said, continuing to keep the pressure on the Avalanche, getting shot after shot on goal. I guess by the end, they only officially have 9 shots on goal by the end of the period, but they had a number of shot attempts and were creating a lot of offensive zone pressure. And that was something that Hackstall made a point of in practice, having, well, had some choice words for the team in practice about actually shooting the puck after only putting up 18 shots on goal against Edmonton. So at least for this first period, it seems like they got that message, as again, they really were shooting the puck quite a bit, even if only 9 of them officially made it on net. And that extends even to the power play that Colorado gets late in this period, as the Kraken make the best of that as well, getting a shorthanded chance early on in it. It's Tanev and Wennberg that make the best of a Makar bobble by the blue line, turning it into a 2-on-1 chance back the other way shorthanded. Tanev gets the shot off, it's saved by Georgiev, but it goes out to the other side, where Wennberg takes 3 whacks at it, and eventually the third one goes over the pad of Georgiev and into the net to give the Kraken the shorthanded goal. Wennberg his first of the season, and the Kraken the 2-0 lead. Right up until it's challenged for goaltender interference, and it turns out that Tanev did slide a bit into the foot of Georgiev. And of course, although it was called a good goal on the ice, and it was a pretty borderline one, I really could have seen this going either way, they end up overturning it, so it's no goal for Wennberg and still a 1-0 game. And yeah, I know it's going to sound a bit homer that I'm saying that I could have seen this still being a good goal, even though Tanev does make clear contact with Georgiev. I'll put it this way, had it been at the other end of the ice and this was contact on Decord and a goal for the Avalanche, I would not have been terribly surprised if the goal had stood. I suppose regardless of what anyone thinks, by the letter of the law of goaltender interference, I think this does fit it, so it probably was technically the right call to have this be no goal. The Kraken have the 1-0 lead, which they'll maintain through the last few minutes and into the intermission. Although with 0.3 seconds left, they do end up going to the penalty kill again, which will basically then be a full power play for the Avalanche to start the second. A power play that they never end up getting to use all of, as there's an equaling call to negate the last 48 seconds of it for 4-on-4, then the Kraken get a power play. Nothing ends up happening out of any of that odd man advantage or 4-on-4, so we get into the meat of the second period with the Kraken still leading by 1. And for what it's worth, up until about the halfway point of the second period, the Kraken remained competitive. Joey Decord was looking great in net for them, making a few big saves. In fact, he had one absolutely spectacular save late in the first period to maintain that 1-0 lead, getting across after a puck bounced off the end boards out to the other side, which we've already seen go against the Kraken once against Grubauer a couple games ago. So Decord gets his toe to that one, and actually even the glove as well, I think, might have made the save. Either way, he was building off of that fantastic save to end the first period with more incredible goaltending here midway through the second to maintain that lead for the Kraken. However, once again, midway through the second period split almost perfectly once again by that 10-minute mark, just like in the first period against the Oilers, although this time it's halfway through the game as well and splits the game perfectly in half. The Kraken just fall apart through the last 30 minutes of this game. In fact, coming into this 10-minute mark, they were sitting at 16 shots on goal, just 2 shy of their total against the Oilers, and by the end of this game, they had 19. So, yeah, that's 30 minutes of hockey for the Kraken with 3 shots on goal. Meanwhile, the other end of the ice, the Avalanche start creating offensive momentum, and they start scoring. The first one does come off of a rebound that Decord probably shouldn't have let up. The shot hits him in the chest, and while he has been fantastic so far this season at just sponging up every shot that comes his way and not allowing very many rebounds at all, and the ones that he does allow, he controls pretty well. This one hits him in the chest, trickles out, ends up out to the side of the net, kind of along the goal line, where McKinnon just fires it towards the net, ends up hitting the side of the netting, but on that part of the netting where it kind of curls up towards the post, which allows it to then bounce a little bit out in front, just enough for Rantanen to get in behind Decord, and a couple touches of the puck later, it's in the back of the net, in spite of Borgen trying to make a last-second effort to lift the puck of Rantanen before he can put it in the net. Either way, the score is tied, and then not long after that, the Kraken are going to the kill. And while the first 2 kills had gone well for the Kraken, this one does not. Halfway through the power play, a shot on goal from up by the blue line right down the middle at Decord by, I think, Taves, ends up bouncing off Decord. Again, it's a rebound that he probably could have prevented. He sees the shot coming all the way. At the very least, probably could have controlled it a little bit better. Either way, the rebound goes right out to Ross Colton, who then has no trouble putting it into the net behind Decord to give the Avalanche the power play goal and make it 2-1. Now, the Kraken do battle back for the last few minutes of the second period, getting 2 more shots on goal, so we go to the third with the Kraken actually on a power play and down just 1, so still very much in this game. But then they decide to just not play the third period whatsoever. Down 1 goal in this third period, they only managed to get 1 shot on goal, and while technically that would be enough to tie the game and send it to overtime, that 1 shot on goal doesn't come until the last minute and a half of the period, and it comes from deep within the Kraken end of the ice, and it's Larson just frustratingly firing a shot down the ice towards the net. He ends up getting it on goal, so by technicality it's a shot on goal, but effectively the Kraken don't get a shot on goal throughout this entire third period. And the Kraken are almost as much of a mess defensively in this period than they are offensively, and that doesn't show up any better than with the first goal that they end up giving up here just a few minutes into the period. A goal in which you could have easily been convinced that they were on the penalty kill, even though they have 5 guys out on the ice. It's still 5-on-5, but the Avalanche are passing the puck freely around the outside and slowly contracting the offensive end up to a point where Makar is able to get right between the faceoff dots and fire off an uncontested shot with 3 Kraken players, the second line that was so good in the first period, standing in front of him like, I don't know, pretending they're on the defense of a free kick in soccer, just standing in a perfect line, watching Makar skate up and fire off a free shot. And maybe that works out if it's a guy that isn't particularly talented, but Makar is probably the most talented offensive defenseman in the entire NHL. And you just let him skate up and fire off a free shot on your goaltender, and of course it goes in to make it 3-1. And again, like I just said, this is the line that was fantastic for the Kraken that first period, got the lone goal for them, and created most of the good scoring opportunities that they had in that first period. But on this play, the 3 of them are as useful as the thousands of Kraken fans that were in attendance spectating this goal happen. Then a few minutes later, it's a 2-on-1 rush from McKinnon and Drouin, and they make the most of it. McKinnon gets the pass through the lone defenseman for the Kraken, and Drouin puts it in the back of the net. It's 4-1, so we get late in the game. The Kraken pretty much already know this one's over. They start to get even more sloppy and completely undisciplined and start handing out power plays like they're candy to the Avalanche, starting with Vince Dunn with about 5.5 minutes left, getting called for slashing, and then on his way to the box yelling a choice word at the official, which we've heard hot mics that sometimes this is a word that gets yelled at officials when players aren't particularly happy with calls made, and they tend to get away with it, as weird as it is. I mean, it's the type of thing that might get you thrown out of an NBA game and certainly would get you an extra 15 yards if not thrown out in an NFL game. But in this case, Dunn yells it loud enough for every soul in that arena to hear. Any kids in attendance might have learned a new word. Dunn gets thrown out of the game for that and gets an extra penalty on top of it, so it's now a double minor that the Kraken have to kill off. 4 minutes of the 5.5 minutes left, they're going to be on the penalty kill, assuming that they can keep the puck out, which I suppose they do for a while, but eventually the Avalanche find the back of the net. It's Makar with a shot that's just tipped nicely out in front by Nichushkin. It's 5-1. There's a couple more penalties that are exchanged here late in the game, but it doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to get too into it. Avalanche win this one 5-1. So once again in the end for the Kraken. In this one, it's pretty much the same story that we've seen through a vast majority of the games to this point this season, through a lot of the losses and even some of the wins, where the Kraken looked fantastic through the first period, outplaying their opponent, really dominating play from start to finish, crisp passing, good transitions, in large part looking like the team that we saw last year and expected to see coming into the season. But then they just really don't manage to get that much out of it. They get 1 goal here, and sometimes they haven't even gotten that. And then go on to play a second period that's competitive, but a bit sloppy at times, and certainly allows the opposing team to get back into the game. And then a third period where they just don't show up whatsoever. I mean, I suppose a couple of times the second and third periods there have been flipped, where the Kraken don't show up in the second, and then play an okay third, but the game's already out of hand at that point. Either way, it's a story that we've seen far too many times, and for whatever reason, this team has shown, almost frustratingly, that the potential is still there to be the team that we saw last year and expected, but then refused to show any kind of consistency, not just from game to game, but within games from period to period. And I don't even know how you start to explain the fact that once again, after getting just 18 shots against one of the worst defensive teams in the NHL to this point in the season against the Oilers, in the last game, they get 16 shots through the first 30 minutes, which is pretty good, and then followed up with 30 minutes in the back half of the game with just 3 shots on goal and a third period down 1 goal where they get 1 shot on goal, and even that one was from the defensive end and basically might as well have not counted. So I guess then all that's left to do is to shift our focus to what the Kraken have to do differently to start getting things turned around, which I still believe that they're capable of doing. They've shown it again in just about every game that they've played, and not just in the odd shift here and there. Pretty much every game they've had a 10 to 20 minute stretch at least where they've looked like the team that we expect to see. But they just are not playing consistently. And as far as that's concerned, that lack of consistency, especially within each game, honestly, I don't know what the answer is there. And I really don't think that Hackstall seems to know either, because to his credit, when things start to take that turn for the worse within games, he's pretty quick to start switching things up with lines and even in some case defensive pairings to try to find a way to get the team back to how they were playing. Whatever he tries just doesn't seem to work, which is something we saw on perfect display in this game, especially in the third period. I don't know how many different lines Hackstall threw out on the ice forward-wise, and they just could not get anything going offensively. Pretty much every group of guys that went out there just tried to do some form of the dump and chase, but pretty much always forgot to do the chase part of it after dumping it in, rarely getting to the puck first along the boards, and when they did get to the puck first, well, I mean, they didn't usually get to it first. They would get to it at the same time as a defenseman and then lose that battle for the puck. And even if they did get clean possession, they would make some stupid pass and turn the puck over, immediately giving it back to the Avalanche before getting even close to a shot attempt on goal. And even if that complete futility of this particular third period with just that one long distance shot on goal is a bit of an outlier in this Kraken season so far, periods like this where they just can't generate any offense whatsoever, and even some games like this, have unfortunately not been that uncommon. Again, they have the 4 home games with just 1 goal and 2 road games with 1 goal, plus getting shut out with those first 3 games. They had just 2 goals in the first 3. All of which has led to a team that is right now sitting at 4th worst in the NHL in goals for per game with just 2.5 goals for in each game. A solid 1.5 less than they had last season, sitting in the top 5. And while they are currently a top 10 team in shots on goal, that's largely because they've now played 1 more game than any other team in the league, and 2 or 3 more than most. So who knows, maybe Hackstall was actually onto something when he chewed the team out at practice on Sunday about shooting the puck at the net, and not just being a team that has the idea of being a team with the mentality of shooting the puck at the net. Because even if they do have a shooting percentage at 8.5 that's also towards the bottom of the league, and you would think would probably come up as the season goes along, right now when it comes to expected goals at 5-on-5, they're one of the 5 worst teams in the NHL. So maybe that shooting percentage is more a sign that they're just not generating good chances, or very many chances at all, and not that much of a comment on just bad luck, even if there has been some bad luck as well. Meanwhile, to be fair, defensively, by the same measure when it comes to expected goals at 5-on-5 per game, they have been noticeably above average in the NHL to this point in the season. Though you could be convinced otherwise having watched these last couple of games where, once again, it's that same issue of the Kraken playing incredible defense, top of the league level defense for large chunks of a game, and then completely disappearing for other big chunks of the game, 10 or 30 minutes in the case of these last couple of games, where they just leave their goaltender completely out to dry. We saw it happen to Grubauer in the back half of that first period, and then in this game, Decord absolutely deserved better. He was fantastic for the vast majority of this game, made a couple of incredible saves, and yet, as we can see from the shot chart and the danger of shots right around the net, he really didn't stand a chance and ends up letting up 5 on 32 shots. All that to say, on the optimistic end, it's clearly there for the Kraken if they can figure out how to make it happen consistently, but right now that's just not happening, so it's hard to feel terribly optimistic with how they've been playing lately, especially in these last 2 games, and especially at home entirely throughout the course of this season. As far as Kraken 3 stars, which again, you can be a part of helping decide Kraken 3 stars by supporting this channel a little bit more than you already are by watching this video to this point, by supporting through Patreon through the link down below. I honestly don't think there's 3 stars in this game. I don't really know if there's a single player deserving. Tanev did have a pretty good game, but he was one of the pylons out there for that Makar goal to make it 3-1. And honestly, I don't think anybody on this team really played well enough to get a star in this one. Again, Decord got a bit hung out to dry, but he also let up a couple of rebounds that he shouldn't. So I guess in that way, he gets victimized by this defense one more time tonight. But again, yeah, I think 0 stars is about fitting for this type of performance. For the Kraken, obviously something needs to change, so let me know what you think down in the comment section, what you would change at this point in the season. There's always the chance that they could give Megna a start, considering defensively, well, they've had their issues in these last couple of games, so maybe you mix things up there and at least send a message to a couple of guys. Offensively, well, you might get Eberle back soon, at which point you have to make a decision of do you send either Winterton or Wright back to the AHL. There's also Belmar that you'd have to think would come back at some point. I mean, I guess for Wright and Winterton, well, they'd probably rather be playing in the NHL. It might be better for them if the Kraken are going to play like this to go back to a team where they have a chance to have a little bit more of an impact and play more meaningful hockey. Besides that, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below to help support the channel. And until next time, in Edmonton, where the Kraken will start a back-to-back, hopefully on a good note, as they're at least on the road for that one. Stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.